Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a review of this Bachmann SC44. Now, this is a model that was made a while ago, so I'm actually, well, quite late to the review of this engine. But I think that Bachmann did a really good job on this thing, and there were some really cool design decisions that I thought Bachmann did a really good job on, which I kind of wanted to point out in a video like this. So if you aren't aware of this engine, and haven't seen already a dozen reviews, this video should hopefully provide you some insight on my thoughts on this engine. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, the very first thing I want to point out that Bachmann did really good was the packaging. So I'm not too familiar with Bachmann's modern packaging, but what I do remember was that this is the SC44 packaging. This is what I assume Bachmann used to use for other engines, and this is not a great form of packaging. First off, there's no sliding sleeve, but more importantly, there's these foam pads on the sides, which are taped onto the sides, and you can't, without removing this tape, you can't remove this top lid off. So basically, every single time you want to put the engine, take it in and out of the box, you have to untape, you have to remove the tape off of these guys before being able to lift the top off. Additionally, this design meant that these flaps would just kind of fall right out, so it's kind of a pain to keep all these without losing them. And lastly, the paperwork was just laid into the box, so it wasn't a very great way of doing packaging. However, with this engine, they revamped their packaging, and so now it looks like this. So there's two side panels now, and that actually clips in and holds the paperwork, as you can see underneath, which is a great way of just making the packaging more efficient. These sides also are removable, so they're not you don't have to remove tape to take the engine out of the box every time. And it's also just a very simple design. You just remove the top right here, and then you could just take the top right off just like that. So a much better version of packaging, and honestly I wish other manufacturers would also use this type of packaging, because this is much nicer. It protects the engine more, and also it's much easier to take the engine in and out of the box, and that's very important for someone who maybe don't have their own layout and go to a club to run their trains, and take the trains and their freight cars and passenger cars out of the box every single time they want to run it, which definitely gets annoying, especially with a box like this. So the new design is much better, and I do give props to Bachmann for putting more thought and effort into their packaging. It also does a great job of protecting the engine. This engine arrived to me safely. In fact, I bought a few more, and they all arrived very safe. But let's get to the actual engine now. So the engine, at initial glance, looks really nice. The overall shape, which is quite hard to nail, because this is a rather this is a streamlined engine, so it has some rather strange and wacky curves like this front here. Bachmann absolutely nailed it. I mean, they did work with Amtrak here to ensure that the dimensions and proportions of the nose shape and the overall body is actually is accurate, and props to them for doing that. I mean, it definitely shows. It shows how accurate this thing looks. I think it looks fantastic. It's a very very good looking engine, and they nailed it on the on the overall proportions and shape of this model. That's something that's without working with Amtrak would be rather difficult, I can imagine. In fact, it's something that's actually quite hard to nail, especially in steam engines like streamlined steam. It's very hard to get the nose shape, for example, of a J-class accurate. But Bachmann did a great job with this engine, and just looking at this thing from the front, it looks just like the ones in real life. I've seen these Midwest SC44s run through Illinois and throughout the Midwest, and this is exactly what I recall how they looked. So yeah. The paint also looks really good. I mean, it is a rather complicated paint job. Personally, I'm not really fond of the SC44's paint. I think that Amtrak's this paint job doesn't really look cohesive with their other equipment. It looks kind of strange, and personally, I'm not a huge fan of the SC44 paint scheme. But that being said, Bachmann did a great job in recreating from the prototype. All the little areas are legible. I'm bringing my camera a little closer. You can see the very well printed sides here. Everything is very crisp and very clean. Even the little stamps there, you can see that you can read all of it, which is fantastic. Now the only criticism I have with the paint is there is some paint bleed. It seems fairly noticeable and around the top of the nose. You can see some paint bleed there, and again, very minor critique, but I figured I would point that out. It does seem rather common. Again, you can kind of see it. It's harder to see on this side. This side actually looks pretty decent. There's a little bit of the blue coming out below the red stripe there. Yeah. So again, very minor critique, but I just figured I'd point that out there. But yeah, paint otherwise looks fantastic. In terms of the detail, Bachmann did a great job. So, you know, these engines traditionally, in real life, in other words, didn't have that much detail. I mean, you know, for the most part, they're streamlined. They're not meant to show much, you know, outside piping or handrails or whatever. And so Bachmann faithfully recreated that. There isn't much underneath, as you can see here, nothing really underneath. I don't really know what these are. I assume they're sand lines, but they look kind of strange. But anyways, these are very fragile, but they are faithfully recreated there. You know, the front has its whole network of ME hoses, which these are all connected together. It's one piece. These separately apply windshield wipers, the little Chicago sign, which we'll talk more about later. On the roof, you know, these fans are, this is actually one piece. So there's no, you know, there's no like separate fan piece. This is actually just molded in. Again, Bachmann did a fantastic job with injection molding here. It looks like it's a separate piece, but actually it's just one molded on piece. But it definitely gives that effect. All the grills are very finely molded. This is not an etched metal piece, but it looks the part. You can even kind of see the beams that are meant to be represented, like the cross beams and stuff inside there. Or sorry, the vertical beams. You can kind of see the vertical lines there that it's meant to represent. And Bachmann overall did a really good job with these vents. These vents on the sides here are actually, you know, etched metal. And they look fantastic. You can actually see through them. You can see the interior, the wiring and panels and whatever inside there, which has that depth to it. It doesn't look like it's painted on. There's actually depth, and you can actually look inside, and you know, this part lights up, which is really cool. The inside there, that piece is actually just a piece of cardboard. So if you take the shell apart, which I have done already, that inside piece is actually just printed on a piece of like cardstock or cardboard or paper. It is not plastic. It is not, you know, definitely not a separate piece. But it gives the illusion, and honestly, no one's looking that close, and you really can't tell that much through the etched metal anyways. So, you know, good way of saving some money there on costs. And it looks good. So yeah, I can't complain. I will say that these trucks, sort of like the SC44, have the speed sensors, but they're or what I believe are speed sensors. In any case, some sort of sensor. And these are, you know, molded onto the truck. The trucks kind of look a little 2D. They look a little flat. They don't show much depth to them, which is kind of common for Bachmanns, to be honest. Not really much of a complaint, but just something to note there. But yeah, these parts are molded in, and it's mostly they do it just because otherwise it'd be way too fragile. It'd be way too easy to break off, and so I can understand why Bachmann chose to mold those on. Also saves some costs, and yeah, I think that's a choice that I totally can understand and respect. Yeah, the rear also very well detailed. You know, very fine. There's some grab irons down there, some handrails and whatnot. This piece, there's a glass window insert. However, you can't see inside. It's just, you know, black. Like the glass is clear, but the piece behind it is black, so you can't see through that. Up on top, there's also some molded on, you know, air conditioning piping. Again, that's something that I don't care for, making it separately applied. I don't mind at all that Bachmann made that molded on, because it's not something that you really look at anyways. They did a pretty good job on the interior. It's not that easy to see, but you know, it is in there. You can actually see the door or the chair there and stuff like that. It is only, I believe, one color, so there isn't, you know, any like, it's not painted inside, which is something you might want to do. But it looks the part. There's no figures inside, which is a little unfortunate, but that's okay. These rear view mirrors are actually, they're separately applied, and they are, I don't really know what they're made of. I believe they're plastic, but I could be wrong. But in any case, they're actually very robust. They look very fragile, but Bachmann did a great job of making them, you know, hard to break off. I think they're slightly flexible, so they're quite hard to get damaged, which is really impressive, because usually these pieces are some of the most fragile parts of an engine. But Bachmann managed to make those very, well, relatively speaking, robust, which is very impressive. But yeah, overall, as I said, the detail looks great, the engine looks great. Bachmann, once again, put detail where it matters. Like the separately applied handrails and whatever in the front here. But they saved, on costs on areas so you don't really look at like underbody and, like up here and whatnot. So I think, props to Bachmann for focusing on the details that matter. That's something that I find very important. So yeah. That's the details. And that's pretty much it for the visual things. This thing is, just like all modern diesels and electrics, this thing runs fantastically. It's got a, a 5-pole CAN motor, quiet drive, has great slow speed control. I'll show you how it runs, but it's mostly, you can see videos of this of these things running from different people on YouTube, so there's really no need for me to show that. What I do want to show you now is the lighting. So this is another area which I think Bachmann did a fantastic job on. So, they hired TCS to make the decoders for them, or I guess more so they partnered with them. And TCS did a fantastic job, in my opinion, recording, real sounds from Amtrak engines and putting them into here. They actually, I don't believe they sell decoders for the SC44s separately. You can only get a TCS decoder with this sound file if you buy this exact engine from Bachmann. So that is pretty interesting. But despite that, they did a really good job with the sound, in my opinion. And what I think they really did well on is the lighting. It is absolutely crazy what they've done with, the 10 function outputs that TCS decoders normally come with. Every single light on this engine that you would expect to be turned on will turn on. So, the ditch lights, which are 2 separate functions because they have to flash. The marker lights, the marker lights turn on. This little sign that says Chicago turns on, just like in real life. The headlight obviously turns on. The number boards turn on. These beacons turn on. This emergency light turns on. The side lights that, that come out of both sides here, just like in real life, those turn on. And the rear light turns on. Of course, the rear markers also turn on. So literally every single lighting feature you would want to, you would expect from an engine like this turns on. The only ones that don't turn on, which to me are not downsides at all, is there are no ground lights. Again, I don't personally care for those at all. In real life, you're not looking at those often. Those are usually turned off. Only at stations and stuff do they usually turn them on. And also there's no interior cab light, which is prototypical. In real life, you don't see the cabs bright. Especially not at night. That'd be the equivalent of like driving your car with the interior lights on at night. You couldn't see anything outside. So it is prototypically accurate for the cabs to not be brightly lit at night or even during the day. You can't see you don't see the inside of your car being lit in the daytime either. So again, those are 2 lighting outputs that they don't include, and I'm glad they don't include them because there's really no point to adding those things. I'd much rather them spend the 10 function outputs on the lights that do work that I just mentioned. I'd much rather have the functioning emergency beacon than a cab light that I will never use. So Bachmann did a really good job with the lighting. And my favorite part of all of this, my favorite feature in this engine as a whole, is if you press the emergency brake, that will obviously stop the engine immediately. It will trigger an emergency, air whoosh sound where all the air is being dumped. And that is the button that actually turns on the emergency beacon light here. No other function output, no other function button will turn that light on unless if you, press the emergency button, the emergency stop button on your DZZ controller. That's the only way to turn this on. That's a really cool little feature, I can appreciate that kind of that thoughtfulness, I guess, Bachmann put inside this engine. Usually that button isn't really mapped to anything. Only recently did like Tsunami 2, for example, start putting the air dumping emergency brake sound to that button. But usually that button is just turns your motor off basically. But now not only did they add the sound, but they also had it so this lighting output is controlled by that button, which I thought was just like, that's ingenious, man. That's really, really cool. So yeah. Alright, so I'm gonna cut here to show you guys how they actually look with the engine in operation. As you can see, the beacons work, everything here is lit, the number boards and whatnot. The ditch lights work, they start flashing if you press the bell or the horn. Again, looks really good. The headlight turns on. I actually turn that off right there. The marker lights will turn on. In fact, the rear ones are lit currently, but the marker lights in the front will turn on if you change direction, just like this. And similarly, the rear light will turn on. So those look really good. And then also you got, of course, the side lights. It looks really blue in this, but really it's more or less white. It's a little bit blue, but that's actually very prototypical. These engines have oddly blue lights for everything. So yeah. And then finally, of course, the emergency beacon. If I press the emergency stop button on my controller, this is what happens. So again, that's definitely my favorite feature in this engine. I think that's so cool that the emergency stop button actually does something and triggers something. But yeah, just wanted to show these in real life, and of course, as I said, you'll see videos of this guy running in any other YouTube video, but I mostly wanted this video to be focused on, my thoughts instead of running clips. So yeah, great sounding engine though. Great running engine, and yeah, back to the video. But yeah, overall, I think Bachmann did a really good job on this engine. It looks great. It's not that expensive. And again, just like Bachmann, they knew how to optimize. They knew how to optimize on which details to add and which ones to keep molded on. They knew how to optimize the lighting outputs. They just knew where to put their money, like their R&D, their research and design budget. They knew where to put it. They partnered with Amtrak to get accurate dimensions and good painting. They put money when their details are. They put the money where they wanted to put the lights in. Everything is just really well optimized in this engine, in the design and the outcome of this engine. And I could really appreciate Bachmann for doing that. So anyways, that's pretty much it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed on my thoughts on this engine. If you have any comments or questions, please comment down below. I try my best to answer all of those. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.